You got to see what's happening. They all want to come back to Michigan and build cars again. You know why? Because of our tax and tariff policy.
Since inception, I really wanted to focus on American manufacturers. So about 95% of our supplier pool is domestic, or so we thought. We're discovering that's not exactly true, meaning many of our suppliers, the key components or elements of their products that we need are imported mostly from Asia.
President Trump is pretty pleased with his sweeping tariffs.
We're rich as hell. We're the hottest country in the world, and I like that.
In fact, they'll make Americans poorer, and the president has started something he cannot win.
Once celebrated as monuments of American industrial might, vast plants in Detroit and Ohio now stand silent. Locked gates, broken windows, and empty parking lots where thousands of cars once rolled out each day. Communities that lived by the rhythm of the autopt are watching their lifeblood evaporate. As companies once considered unshakable, Tesla, Ford, Cadillac, Nissan, quietly retreat. The assembly lines that once blazed with light 24 hours a day have become little more than cold metal skeletons, relics of a vanished era. For towns that depended entirely on the car industry, the sudden halt has not just taken away jobs, it has created what locals now describe as economic dead zones, where hope is as scarce as paychecks. And in the heart of the Midwest, unemployment has nearly doubled in just 9 months. A statistic that feels less like a number and more like a scar on the landscape. Could this be the moment America's proudest industry begins its irreversible decline? Before we dive in, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content matters. If the empty plants of Detroit and Ohio symbolize the collapse of an era, then Tesla's retreat is the clearest sign that even America's brightest star cannot withstand the pressure. Once hailed as the crown jewel of U.S. innovation, the company found itself cornered by a tariff storm it could no longer absorb. In just 1 quarter, those duties added an estimated $300 million to operating costs, enough to shake even a giant. Markets reacted brutally. Within days of President Trump's tariff announcement, Tesla's stock tumbled by 20%, wiping billions in market value and fueling panic among investors who had once treated the brand as untouchable. At the same time, the company quietly shifted its flagship 4,680 battery program across the border to Quebec, lured by a $1.2 billion package of incentives that Washington could not match. The final blow came from policy change at home. When emissions penalties were rolled back, Tesla lost nearly $2.8 billion in carbon credit revenue, a stream that once kept its balance sheet alive. Without that cushion, the company's American operations no longer looked sustainable, and so the icon of electric ambition became the latest in a line of departures. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It's how we keep uncovering what others won't say. But Tesla is not alone. The weight of tariffs has fallen just as heavily on Cadillac, transforming what was once a symbol of American prestige into a burden threatening its very survival. A 25% duty has pushed the price of every model higher, adding anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 per vehicle, an increase that even loyal customers struggle to justify. The Escalade, Cadillac's flagship SUV and a long-standing status icon, now carries a price tag of $93,295, placing it far beyond the reach of families who once saw it as aspirational. Rising costs are not confined to showrooms. In Tennessee, General Motors has already announced it will halt production of its EV models, the LAR and the Vistique, by the end of 2025, effectively stalling the company's electric ambitions in the U.S. Local leaders have not stayed silent. In Arlington, Texas, home to one of Cadillac's most important plants, the mayor issued a blunt warning calling the tariff regime nothing less than a job-killing policy. For workers already bracing for layoffs, the words feel less like rhetoric and more like confirmation of a future they feared was coming. Cadillac's troubles might seem severe, but they pale compared to the bleeding endured by the industry's largest players. Ford, the very name once synonymous with American resilience, has been forced into retreat. Losses of more than $1.5 billion have triggered plant closures in both Chicago and Michigan, leaving nearly 9,000 workers without jobs in just a matter of months. Entire neighborhoods that once depended on the daily rhythm of factory shifts now face shuttered gates and a silence that feels permanent. Across the Atlantic, Stellantis, parent to Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge, has suffered an equally brutal blow. Nearly 900 U.S. workers have already been laid off, with multiple assembly lines frozen indefinitely. The company reported losses of $2.3 billion, while the direct impact of tariffs alone has been estimated at over $330 million. What began as a policy designed to protect domestic jobs has instead accelerated their disappearance, eroding the very foundation of America's industrial belt. For both Ford and Stellantis, the question is no longer about weathering a temporary storm, but about whether they can continue producing in the United States at all. If Ford and Stellantis are bleeding inside America, then Chevrolet and Nissan are bleeding America itself. Legendary models once proudly stamped with Made in USA, from the Silverado pickup to the Blazer SUV, are now being assembled in plants across Mexico and South Korea. For consumers, the badge may look the same, but for workers in Michigan, Texas, and Missouri, the reality is unmistakable. The assembly lines have gone dark. In the second quarter of 2025 alone, General Motors recorded losses of $1.1 billion, a figure that reflects both collapsing demand and the costs of abandoning its U.S. footprint. The logic is cold and simple. By shifting production south and overseas, GM slashes labor costs by as much as 70%, a saving that Washington's tariff walls could not erase. Nissan has made similar calculations. Once eager to expand in Tennessee, the company has reversed course, cutting 20% of its American capacity and leaving more than 25,000 workers without jobs. For the small industrial towns that depended on those factories, the effect has been devastating. Shops close, schools lose funding, and entire communities hollow out, becoming shells of their former selves. Each departure reinforces the same brutal message. Global production is not waiting for America to solve its crisis. As if the collapse of American icons were not enough, foreign automakers caught in the same storm are facing a different kind of reckoning. Hyundai, long a quiet success story in the southern United States, has become the victim of a double squeeze. Tariffs that drive up costs on the front end and immigration crackdowns that choke the very workforce needed to keep production alive. In the second quarter of 2025, Hyundai's profits tumbled by more than 20%, with analysts warning that sticker prices on popular models could climb by another $3,000 to $6,000. The company, which once marketed itself as the affordable alternative to pricier U.S. brands, now risks losing its competitive edge in the very market where it had gained the most ground. But numbers tell only part of the story. At the company's battery plant in Georgia, federal agents carried out one of the largest immigration raids in recent memory, detaining 475 workers in a single sweep. Overnight, an already fragile supply chain lost its lifeline, leaving production schedules in chaos and exposing just how dependent modern manufacturing has become on migrant labor. Managers were left scrambling to fill shifts, and local suppliers suddenly found themselves without orders that had once seemed guaranteed. Faced with spiraling costs and a shrinking labor pool, Hyundai has begun pivoting its supply chain strategy away from the United States entirely, redirecting investment toward Vietnam and India. That shift does more than reduce American jobs. It signals to other foreign automakers that the U.S. may no longer be a reliable base of operations. For Washington, it is another warning that policies meant to shield American industry are instead accelerating its flight abroad. While competitors overseas quietly seize the opportunities left behind, Hyundai's retreat is not just another corporate story. It is a glimpse of the broader wreckage. Every departure, every shuttered line adds weight to a national bill that is becoming impossible to ignore. For American families, the damage shows up first in the showroom. New vehicles now carry an extra $3,000 on average, while pickup trucks, long the backbone of rural and working-class life, have surged by as much as $10,000. What was once a household purchase has turned into a luxury many simply cannot afford, forcing families to hold on to older vehicles longer, despite mounting repair costs and dwindling reliability. The consequences ripple outward. Auto loans are already climbing to record highs, stretching family budgets to the breaking point. Insurance premiums tied to the rising price of cars have followed the same trajectory, adding hundreds of dollars per year to household expenses. For younger Americans entering the job market, owning a car, the basic ticket to economic mobility in much of the country, is slipping out of reach. The national picture looks even more alarming. Analysts warn that the U.S. economy could shed between 45 and 75 billion in output, with inflation creeping higher by another 1.3%. Auto sales, once a steady engine of growth, have plunged by nearly 1 million units, falling to an annual volume of just 15 million. That decline reverberates well beyond dealerships. State governments lose tax revenue, suppliers face bankruptcy, and local economies once sustained by factory payrolls see their main sources of income vanish. What was once the pride of American manufacturing, the industry that made Detroit a global symbol of modernity, now risks being remembered as a cautionary tale. Instead of fueling prosperity, the auto sector is draining confidence, eroding the middle class, and exposing the fragility of policies that promised protection but delivered decline. While the United States bleeds jobs and capital, Canada has turned crisis into opportunity. Quebec has rapidly positioned itself as the new hub for electric vehicle batteries, anchored by Tesla's decision to shift its 4,680 program northward under a $1.2 billion incentive package. Far from being a consolation prize, it is becoming the cornerstone of a new industrial ecosystem. Investors have noticed Japan and Europe, wary of Washington's volatility, are channeling capital into Canada, betting on political stability and long-term security. Ontario's universities are accelerating the pipeline of engineers and technicians, creating the human capital that guarantees these projects will not be short-lived experiments, but durable anchors in the global supply chain. Slowly but unmistakably, Canada is emerging as the replacement hub in a value chain that once revolved around American factories. And so the story comes full circle. As factories in Detroit and Ohio fall silent, the lights in Quebec and Ontario burn brighter. The question now is not just how much America has lost, but whether it can ever claw back what it has ceded. Could Canada's ascent mark the beginning of a permanent realignment in North America's industrial balance? Or is this only the first chapter in a much larger struggle over the future of global manufacturing? Thanks for watching, and if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every click fuels the truth.